Welcome back. For the past 30 years, South Africa has been on a journey to build an unbiased society based on respect for human rights. And despite the many challenges and setbacks along the way, the country has made quite significant progress in protecting and advancing the rights of its citizens. As we mark Human Rights Month, President Cyril Ramaphosa has reiterated his call for society to frown upon the scourge of violent crimes committed against women and children, which is a direct onslaught and threat to the progress we have made in the adherence to human rights. And to highlight this journey, the National Conference on 30 Years of Human Rights in South Africa is being held for the next few days in Boksburg in Johannesburg. And for more, we now cross live to Sakina Kamwendo, who will be joined by a number of guests from government and human rights organizations. A very good morning to you, Sakina. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Simpiwe. And good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Birchwood Conference Centre. And this, of course, is where over the next 3 days, many South Africans and international guests will be deliberating on 30 years of South African freedom, but also 30 years of rights and human rights in particular here in South Africa. And incidentally, the Birchwood Conference Centre is not too far, a hop, skip and a jump, as it were, from where the CODESA, the Convention for Democratic South Africa, those conversations took place. So perhaps rather apt that we are back here in Ekurhuleni, where those initial conversations took place to lay the framework for democratic South Africa. And now, 30 years on, we are here to take stock of how far we've come, especially as it pertains to human rights in South Africa. And of course, there will be much deliberation, as I said, over 3 days, and a stellar cast of guests. And the keynote speaker, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa himself, will be speaking later today. But before then, we are going to, of course, try and get a sense of what's to come and what to expect. And I'm joined by the man who will be directing proceedings here this morning. And this is, of course, the Director General in the Department of Justice and Correctional Services. This is Advocate Advocate Doctor Mashabane. Yes. Dr. Mashabane, thanks so much. And I keep getting confused about Advocate Doctor Mashabane. But Doc Mashabane, thank you so much for speaking to us. Yes. And this, of course, a very important conversation to be had here this morning. But speak to us for South Africans watching. Why should they be interested, and why is this an important day?
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers at home and all South Africans. This indeed is a very important day. They should be interested because this is about the history of this country and the future of this country. As we know, in a few days' time, on the 21st of March, we'll be marking, the anniversary of Sharpeville, which occurred in 1960, where the apartheid government mowed down 69 civilians or South Africans who were marching and demanding their rights. And it's very important because, as you have mentioned, at the dawn of democracy in 1994, the Sharpeville Day was renamed the Human Rights Day, and the entire month of March is a Human Rights Month, just as part of that constitutional commitment that the democratic state will never repeat what the apartheid government did, centuries and decades of gross violation of human rights and subjugation of the majority of the population of this country.
Dr. Mashabane, let's talk about the various stakeholders who will be present here, not just today, but over the 3 days of this particular conference.
As we have already mentioned, the President will open the conference as the keynote speaker. Members of the executive, that's members of cabinet, ministers and deputy ministers, will be here. The Chief Justice as well of the Republic will be here, and members of the judiciary, as well as the Speaker of the National Assembly and members of the legislatures. Various premiers and the speakers of provincial legislatures have been invited. But you also have a large contingent from the legal profession, different organized formations in the legal profession. The academia, professors of law as well will be here, and broadly civil society. Religious leaders will be here, as well as international guests from our region here and from the United Nations, as well as the African Union.
So it's obvious that, we are going to take stock of what's happened over the past 30 years. But is there any other objective that you're hoping to achieve?
Look, the primary objective really, other than, marking, the occasion of human rights, as well as, remembering those who had fallen during the Sharpeville massacre, the main point, of course, is to have that reflection on the state of human rights in this country, because that's the major commitment emanating from our constitution and our current, constitutional political order, that there will be a respect for human rights in this country. So the idea really is to make a reflection of the Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights, and say how far have we gone as a nation, but also how far has the state gone in respecting Chapter 2 and implementing Chapter 2 to make sure that broadly there's a culture of respect for human rights in the country.
And Chapter 2 is, of course, the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. And speaking of, how would you assess, some of the achievements, the most noteworthy achievements, let's start there, over the past 30 years?
Look, 30 years is a short period, but it's a long period insofar as if we were to make an assessment of this period, it's going to take us the whole day. So the conference is over 3 days. So what we have done strategically is to have a high-level reflection, which is what is going to happen after the president will have spoken. There will be this panel made up of eminent personalities who will be discussing, generally making an assessment, both from governance and generally from dealing with issues of discrimination and inequality, women's rights, the rights of the vulnerable and all of that. But the second day, you'll begin to see that the program will be shifting much more into the socio-economic rights, which is what the Constitution or Chapter 2 mentions as well, that socio-economic rights, given the history, of underdevelopment, separate development, inequality, will have to be, realized in a progressive manner. So the discussion will be around the progressive realization of socio-economic rights. And we've asked the statistician general to give an overview in the morning and set the scene before that discussion, and just reflect and say, over the past 3 decades, how far have we gone in addressing challenges of socio-economic nature? So that will be the discussion, looking at the right to education, looking at the right to health, the right to water and sanitation, access to housing, and so on and so forth. But broadly as well, look at social development issues and have that reflection. So we hope that, because we have people from academia who can scientifically look at matters, as well as ministers who will be here, who will in fact lead in their portfolios and make a presentation in the areas that they are deployed and they are responsible for, and give a reflection of over the past 3 decades. So we may not cover the whole Chapter 2, but we'll get a sense out of that, particularly around socio-economic rights. That's why before we even get there will be a discussion on the state of the transformation of the economy, what we call transforming and building a resilient economy in order to fight poverty, joblessness, and underdevelopment.
So the academia will be here, and as you say, there will be quite a bit of emphasis on empirical evidence through the stats that will be presented by the statistician general and those from academic circles. But what about ordinary South Africans and their lived reality? Because this is as much a reflection of their reality, of the protection of their empirical and inalienable rights as per Section 2 of the Constitution.
A big contingent of the conference, in terms of the conference, you're just looking at almost just under 1,000, but more than 40% of the people who will be here will be coming from civil society, ordinary people who you will not say are not in academia, not legal practitioners, are not senior bureaucrats, but ordinary South Africans who operate in the space of promotion and advocacy of human rights, who will have an opportunity as well to express their views, to comment on their different lived experiences. And of course, the conference, in terms of the social media platforms, will be open. There will be a Zoom process that will allow people to participate even in the different breakaways. But over and above that, you have the participation of the leaders and members of the constitutional bodies, like the Chapter 9 institutions, whose mandate primarily as well is to make sure that they monitor the promotion and protection of human rights in the country. So they also then have an opportunity as well to make inputs, to reflect on what they have observed, working with the communities, working with South Africans on a daily basis over the past 30 years. Because the idea really is not to mark whether people have failed or not. is to chart a way forward and say, then what now? After having had this discussion, having made this reflection, what do we do, going forward in the next 30 years? What program do we adopt to make sure that we continue to consolidate or deepen, programs that will lead to the building a strong culture of respect for human rights?
So what's wrong with saying you have failed here, you've done exceptionally well there? Is there anything wrong with that sort of assessment?
There isn't. In fact, that's where it should start. There must be an objective and honest reflection on the failures and the weaknesses, because if we don't acknowledge those failures and weaknesses, we will then not be able to develop a strong program that will take us forward to the future. So that's very important. But the point I'm making is that we're not going to end there and say you just failed. The issue will be there are successes here that have been scored. There are challenges, there are failures in this area. And this, as they always say, Sakina, the rear mirror is more clearer than the windshield. So based on that experience, so the lived experience is not to condemn anyone. That lived experience is to help all of us and say the choices that we might have made over the past 3 decades might have been informed by, lack of experiences or not knowing better. But surely 30 years is a sufficient period for us to make that reflection and say we could have chosen, we could have decided otherwise, knowing what we know, going to the future. This is the direction that we're going to take.
Well, much more discussion to be had here at Birchwood, and thanks to our guest, the Director General in the Department of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Doctor Mashabane. I got it right finally. Well, that's where we're going to park it for now, and of course we'll have many more guests, and let us know your thoughts and any questions you may have, because it's going to be an interesting one. Some speakers from the United Nations also set up for day one, and they will be giving messages of support and also later reflections, as Dr. Mashabane had said, about what we have achieved so far and of course where we have fallen short. Let us know your thoughts on that as well. But for now, back to Simpiwe in studio.
All right, SK, thank you so much for that update. We'll cross back to you a little later on. Sakina Kamwendo there at the Birchwood Hotel on Gauteng's East Rand, where President Cyril Ramaphosa will open that conference on human rights in South Africa as the country is celebrating 30 years of constitutional democracy.